haven't seen these cubs. Not once since I've been back. I'm starting to take it personally. It's ridiculous. Every time I come in, I just have a feeling today is going to be the same because I can't see a hyena. They just don't like me anymore. And Kirsty's suggested a song, but let's finish our... I don't quite know what a spotted hyena song would be. I'm sure there's a childhood song somewhere about laughing hyenas. But it doesn't matter because I can't even serenade them because they're not here. Oh, there they are. Yes! The song, imaginary song worked. Well done, Senzo. Yay! Hi, guys. Oh, I'm so excited. Hello, you. Oh, you've got so big. Hello, Ribbon. It's all right, sweetheart. It's okay, sweetheart. There we go. Our hyenas are home once again. And flop, down goes Ribbon as the two little ones suckle away. Okay. I cannot tell you how relieved I am. Finally having a chance to see them. Now, despite their terrible reputation, spotted hyenas are probably my favorite predator, although it is hard to choose, you know, when you think about leopards and wild dogs. And certainly, hyenas are probably not conventionally as pretty, although nobody can deny that the cubs are utterly adorable. They look like little bear cubs with those massive ears. Listen to, I don't know, I'm going to try and be quiet so you can hear the sounds they're making. Of course, as I said that, they went quiet. Little sidelong glance in my direction. They're niggling at each other, trying to find a good and suitable position. And of course, these little hyena cubs will already have their own established hierarchy between siblings. I still haven't spent enough time with them to truly get an idea as to just what that hierarchy is. Their mum is Ribbon, patiently sitting with them, sleeping away. Hey girl, shame that can't be very comfortable, because of course hyena cubs are born with fully erupted teeth, so that must be very uncomfortable for her. Welcome to Muhammad, and thank you for sending through your question. As you can see, these babies are still very much reliant upon their mum, but Muhammad would like to know how long before they are able to leave her. Our spotted hyenas actually lactate and suckle their cubs for a considerable period of time, sometimes over a year. It depends very much upon the hyena. Sometimes it is 8 months, sometimes it's over a year, sometimes up to a year and a half that the females will suckle their cubs. And that means that they actually have a relatively long dependency period. And you're probably looking at hyena cubs only becoming independent at around about a year and a half old. However, they do start to follow their mums at around about between 10 to 12 months old, particularly if their mother is a lower ranking female. And the reason behind that is, in theory, in a very packed den site, only the higher ranking females will bring food back to the den for the cubs to start eating solid meat. But for the lower ranking females, they've actually got to take their cubs with them. And if there are female cubs, if there is a female with them, they could end up staying in the clan with their mother for the rest of their lives. They might not ever move away from her. So in a way, whilst they're not still dependent on her, they're still with her for the period of their entire lifespan, which I think is quite special. If it's a little male, even then, it might stay around and be part of the clan, although its interactions will be very different to its female sibling, because male spotted hyenas automatically fall below the ranking of the females. They're much smaller and generally more submissive. That little cub is falling asleep on its feet. It's suckling. The other one is stretched out. And you can see them pushing with their paws up against their mum. And that, of course, is to stimulate milk production. That little cub's eyelids are drooping while it suckles. The lovely thing about spotted hyena dens usually is that it's not just a place to raise babies, it's actually a social hub. And sad, you want to know how often the other members of the clan will come and visit the den site. Relatively regularly, and although we haven't seen much of that interaction yet, it's very often a way of basically connecting with the rest of the clan members, reaffirming the bonds, reaffirming the hierarchy, just in general. So I'm sure that overnight, I'm sure that these cubs have already met several members of the hyena clan itself. They've probably come through to visit. I've seen lots of tracks coming in and out. So they probably even come through, a member of the clan could come through once every day or every 2 days to come and say hello to the little cubs and to come and greet their mother. So it is very much a social hub. And what I'm looking forward to as these cubs grow up is I'm hoping that with the sort of the time period being correct, I'm hoping that we might actually get several different ages of cubs now at the den site itself. So when Madam and Pretty, and even Scarback actually, who probably are next in line to have cubs, just in terms of time from when they last had cubs. Pretty is probably next along with Scarback, because Pretty's last cub was born in November 2015. Aptly named November, because it was just easier to keep track of them that way. So I would say, and Corky actually, sorry, I forgot, Corky actually had a litter of cubs before Madam. So there's a possibility that as these cubs grow older, or grow up a little bit, that Pretty, Corky and Scarback could all be pregnant, and that's what I'm hoping for, because then we get a lot more of activity, or a lot more activity around the hyena den itself, and then we can look forward to learning and observing some of the more intricate aspects of hyena den or hyena clan dynamics. And that's basically how we learned and how we came to grips with the hierarchy as we understand it, was just by sitting at the den site and watching the interaction of the hyenas with each other. I'm looking forward to that. That's what I'm hoping for. And once these cubs have finished their breakfast, my more immediate excitement is to see whether or not they come up to say hello. Caro, I should know this off the top of my head. Caro would like to know how many teeth hyena have. Leopard has 30. Oh, teats. I'm sorry, not teeth. Oh, well, saved by the mishearing of the question. I'll come back to teeth in a bit. Sorry, you want to know how many teats, how many nipples the hyenas have? 2. They have 2. There have been cases of hyenas having 3 cubs, giving birth to 3 cubs. It's very unusual. The general average number is 2, sometimes only 1, particularly if the birthing process has been particularly hard for the mother. So she's only got 2, and there is always a bit of squabbling over who gets to have the dominant sort of position in suckling between the cubs. So 1 at the bottom, 1 at the top, as you can see. I mean when she's lying on her side, obviously. Hey, little ones. And hyena milk, some of the richest of all of the mammals that we get out here, which is why these cubs grow up so incredibly quickly. And the one thing about a hyena den, it's flies. Senzo is getting them as well. I've got them all fluttering around my head. I'm going to sit patiently and wait for these gorgeous cubs to finish their breakfast, but I'm sure you're all wondering about the lion search. Let's go and hear about it from James. Not so black anymore, actually. They've got their spots now. You can actually clearly see the spots on their skin and on their fur. And those are showing through very, very clearly. And by 3 months old, and these guys must be getting close to that age, all of the black around their fur will pretty much have vanished, and we'll start to see their spot patterns clearly. Now, even now, while we look at them, you can see those spots are relatively indistinct, and there's lots of darkness around the fur, but even now, those spot patterns are established. That will be the same for the rest of their lives, like a fingerprint, essentially, like a human being's fingerprint. And as they grow larger, you'll be able to start to see the spots sort of stretching apart, but the spot pattern will remain exactly the same. Or plunking down. Oh, a little bit of niggling at each other, a little bit of kicking, and just generally trying to get comfortable. Red, good question. You're wondering biologically what will stop a mother lactating for the cubs? That's a good question. It comes at a point where she's introduced them to meat and they're spending more and more time feeding off solid food rather than her milk. And as far as I know, this lactation process is actively stopped by the female, not consciously, but as she starts to wean the cubs, as she starts to refuse to let them suckle, the lack of suckling motion will actually be the stimulus in order to stop them from lactating. Sorry, the Game Drive radio is very busy this morning. It's distracting me. So with human beings, if females choose or mothers choose to breastfeed for longer, they will continue to lactate. If they choose to stop and wean their children off breast milk, they'll stop lactating earlier than those that continue to breastfeed their babies. And as far as I know, it works the same with animals, except they have an instinctive feel for when it's time to stop lactating and when it's time to start refusing the cubs access to the milk. And it's a difficult time for any young animal, and you often get tantrums. You see it with elephants. The young calves scream. Sometimes when you hear those elephant screams during the night on the Djuma Dam camera, that's an elephant baby being weaned, and they have a proper weaning tantrum. Sometimes they go running around, bashing into trees, throwing things. It really is a proper full-on tantrum. And the same applies to hyena cubs. They will also start to make this powerful squealing noise. It's actually termed squeeing, which is a bit of a silly word, but it's called squeeing. And it's high-pitched whiny, and the cubs will follow their mum and basically whine at her in desperation, trying to get her to feed them. You can imagine it's very confusing. And different animals wean their babies at different times. Hyenas are actually very unusual for predators because, generally speaking, lions, leopards, cheetah, wild dogs, those babies will start contortion. Is that very comfortable, little one? Yeah. Lions, leopards, they'll all wean their cubs relatively soon. I mean, a leopard cub is weaned at 3 months old and feeding off solid food, whereas hyenas go on for such an extended period of time. And that's one of the connections to the idea or the theories as to why spotted hyena females have evolved to be bigger than the males. It's the big mother theory. The bigger she is, the more milk she can provide and the longer she can provide it for. And one of the best ways, as perhaps some athletes, not that I'm casting any aspersions, but one of the best ways to get bigger if you're a lady is hormones. And in particular, male hormones, androgen, testosterone, those hormones. And that's one of the reasons put forward as to the theory as to why female spotted hyenas are so much larger than the males. Of course, it comes with its disadvantages. They can suckle for longer, but they've got that very peculiar genital opening, which is a fusion of the urethra and the vaginal tract, and they give birth through that. And it basically looks like it's a pseudo-penis. And it's a very tricky process for them, and that's why often, especially for new mothers, you find that they only give birth to one, and possibly even no cubs alive, because it's such a tricky process for them. And this girl here, the one who's dozing away while her cubs sleep, this is her first litter of cubs, as far as we know. Welcome to Maria. Hold on, let's just let these cubs talk. Okay, they're finished talking now. Good morning, Maria. Good question. Maria would like to know if hyena body parts are sometimes used in muti, in local medicine, or if not here in South Africa, elsewhere. Yes, not to the same extent that lion bones are used, or rhino horn, or of course elephant tusks, although elephant tusks is more of an ornamental thing than it is a medicinal thing. They are used. They're actually quite regularly used by obviously unscrupulous people, but unscrupulous even for animal part traders, as a replacement for lion bones. So basically to try and fool people into thinking that they are buying lion bones for whatever reason it may be. And it's almost invariably in those sorts of things, in those sorts of use of medicinal animal parts, it's almost invariably some kind of fertility medicine, or it is some kind of hangover cure, or for some reason, sort of a general tonic for wellness. And the same applies for lion bones and therefore potentially hyena bones. There are certain places, I think, if I remember correctly, where hyena teeth are also valued in terms of amulets, essentially, or as part of those sorts of things. Sometimes the bones are also used in sangoma bone throwing. So the process of predicting the future or casting spells, as it were, it's used by chucking bones onto the ground along with other seed pods and so on. And sometimes hyena bones, particularly the phalanges of the paws, are used. I'm not sure if this is such a macabre topic, but it's a good question. I'm not sure if their legs or their tails are ever used. I imagine that they are. But it's not quite as bad. I mean, as we look at these little innocent cubs, it's actually such a macabre topic to be talking about. It's not quite as bad as the trade in things like lion bones. There's a much larger trade for those sorts of things. Hyena's biggest threat is loss of habitat and being treated as vermin by farmers. So essentially, as soon as they see a hyena, shooting it in case it goes for their livestock. Fortunately, that's not a fate that our hyenas have to worry about at all. They are perfectly protected where we are, and I don't think we've ever had a case of hyena poaching in this particular area. And on that slightly happier return to a subject, let's go and find out what Brent is up to. Now look at this. Our little cubs have come right up to the vehicle. Hello, little ones, with their bright and curious eyes. Yes, you two. Hi. Hi. What have you got to say for yourself? I'm being very careful how I move. Oh, is that scary? Oh, is that so scary? Look how wobbly their back legs still are. They still haven't fully got the strength in them yet. But yeah, they're coming right up to the vehicle now, and over the next few months, it's behavior that we get to see. Their curiosity just constantly grows and expands to the point that sometimes we have to intervene at a hyena den just to stop them from chewing on the vehicles. They do like to do that. But fascinatingly, they never do it as adults. So as Ribbon, probably the mother, she probably grew up doing this, walking right up to safari vehicles, but she'll never, ever, ever do it now. So it's not behavior that we're worried about that they're going to learn and then start doing it on a regular basis. Look at this cub. What is it digging in? Pile of elephant dung. Does that smell nice? All the new smells. Or is that just grass that your mum has moved about? You've got some on your schnoz. Yes, you do. Hello. Yols. I'm being very careful because I don't have a door. So I'm being very careful to keep my movements very slow because they're going to pick up on them. I'm just going to turn my body slightly to the right. There we go. It's all right. It's okay. You two look so different. I know that sounds completely bizarre, but because we look at them all the time, this one's face is much longer than the other. Yes, talking about you. Yes, wipe your nose. Oh, itchy ear. This is what I love about spotted hyena cubs. If you look into their eyes, there's something seriously bright looking back at you. That's still learning, still full of inquisitiveness. It's okay. And it's also fun to watch them egg each other on. So when one gets closer, then the other feels emboldened, and so on. So they keep encouraging each other, or nipping each other, whichever way it happens to be. And of course, when they find themselves a toy, a piece of bone or a piece of stick, then it becomes a case of what the other one has, I want. Oh. Cub gave Ribbon a fright, Ribbon got a fright, Ribbon gave Cub a fright. Cub run back to the den. and back to sleep. And here comes the little cub wandering back, probably feeling a bit sheepish. While our cub digs through a pile of grass, obviously searching for something interesting. Andrew, you say how many hyena cubs does a hyena have at a time? And that 2 seems very low. Remember that whenever you've got a case of extended investment, somebody's being brave, extended investment in offspring, so years worth of suckling and so on, you'll find that the number of individuals will be relatively low. So an elephant, for example, only really has 1 baby at a time. The hyenas generally have 2. Sometimes one dies during the birthing, the labour process, because it is one that's very complicated. And there are a few recorded cases of hyenas having 3 cubs and all 3 cubs surviving to adulthood. But that's quite unusual because there's a lot of competition over access to mom's milk. So a lot of the time, the weaker cub, if it's a male, for example, a weaker cub might actually not get the access to food that it needs to survive. So it's unusual for all 3 to make it to adulthood. Yeah, they're going to come back now. They're going and exploring. Look how brave they are. Look at you. Was it fun? That big outside world. The other fun part to watch with these hyena cubs at this age is their adult behavior. You see how that one's sniffing the blade of grass and nibbling on it? They actually at this age start to imitate the adults by trying to anal paste on the grass blades as well. So, you use mom as a jungle gym. So hyenas anal paste a substance onto grass blades in order to mark their territory and to basically stay in contact with other hyena clan members. Off it goes again. Are you coming to say hello again? Well, you must find our tires fascinating. All the smells of everywhere we've been. But yes, the hyenas will imitate that behavior. They'll also try to call like the adults, which I love, when they do their little whooping contact call. What you found? What you doing? Hey? What you doing? Now, Alfred, while we watch the cubs, and I'm keeping my voice down just because they're coming right up to us, and I'm going to try and keep my movements slow as well. Sorry, I'm not going to look at you just because I want to keep an eye on what they're doing. Alfred, no, a hyena clan structure is actually very different to that of a wild dog. A wild dog's family structure is actually quite similar to that of wolves in the States and in Europe, or sort of in the North Americas and in Europe, in that they have an alpha male and an alpha female. How cool is this? They're right up close to us. Yes. Hello. Hyena clans are very, very different. So rather than having an alpha male and an alpha female, they have a slightly more complex structure. So all of the females are dominant over the males, whereas with wild dogs, the males are actually larger than the females. And it is purely matriarchal. So it's led by a female, it's led by the matriarch, and then the status of the females below her is determined by their birthright. So if she has cubs, they're females, they're going to be high-ranking. If a low-ranking female has cubs, they will be low-ranking. So in a sort of a rough order... What you got there? A rough order of our clan's hierarchy as we understand it would be Madam, and below that would be Pretty, below that would be Corky, below that would be Corky's daughter Ribbon, who is the mother of these cubs, below that would be Scarback, and below that, right at the bottom in the terms of female hierarchy, would be Gwen, who had cubs at the den site not far away from here, and who has since completely vanished. I'm sure she's still around there, I see her tracks all the time. As for these two, well, we've yet to determine exactly where they're going to stand, but they are going to inherit Ribbon's status as somewhere sort of in the middle of the clan hierarchy. Look how bow-legged they are. That is ridiculous. You can see how underdeveloped the muscles are at the back rather than the front. All of that time and development has gone into their jaws and their head and their front quarters. The back takes a little bit of time to catch up. The males are always lower ranking than the females, but that doesn't mean that they don't play an important role. and sons of the matriarch will inherit a slightly higher status than the other males, but they play an important role in keeping the clan territory safe and constantly contact calling. They actually tend to do a lot more moving than the females do, which is important in maintaining the clan's territory. Or you're going to get lost in that long grass. Look at you, vanishing. You see what I mean about the two of them and their behavior egging each other on? Where one goes, the other follows. And that will slowly start to change as they get older and more independent. But for now, they're basically a double trouble team. One's definitely larger than the other. Oh, Rachel. Good question. Rachel would like to know what exactly is anal paste while we watch these cubs explore their world. It's basically a mucousy concoction, so water mixed with protein. See, I want that stick. I didn't want it. I didn't know I wanted it, but now that you have it, I want it. Give it to me. Sorry, I'm talking about anal paste, and the cubs are just being so adorable. I can't reposition, unfortunately. We'll just have to wait for them to pop out again. Now, anal paste is basically a mixture of pheromones, proteins, essentially, and water. So it's of a similar consistency to, it's quite revolting. It's a similar consistency to sort of a snot-like substance. I don't know how else to term it. And it sits on the blade of grass, and within the scent of that hyena anal paste are all kinds of interesting facts about that hyena. Hey, Mom, what you doing? So its age, its sex, whether or not it is reproductively active yet, or if it is in estrus, if it's a female. It's basically, we've spoken about this with rhino middens and all sorts of other things, but it's kind of like a Facebook status update for that hyena. And every other hyena that comes past will have a sniff. Often they'll anal paste on top of it. Interestingly enough, spotted hyena's anal paste is one color. That of a brown hyena contains two different sections. One which is all of that information I told you about. The other is a little brown blob on top of it, and that is a timestamp. So how old the anal paste is. Oh dear. Wait, Mum, we want to come with. Mummy, can we come with you this time? Your mum's not going to let you come with you. Shame. This is always probably the hardest time of the morning for the hyena cubs, because Mum goes off on an adventure. Actually, probably not an adventure. She goes off to go and have some peace and quiet and sleep the day away, and she leaves the cubs at the den site. But the older they get, the harder that process becomes for her, because they want to follow. So she's got to bring them back again, which is what she's going to do now. If she doesn't, a lot of the time instinct will just kick in. And if they get too far from the den site itself, the cubs start to get anxious, and then they turn around and they run back home. So that instinct of self-preservation is there. It's just battling with their natural sense of curiosity at the moment. So we're going to sit tight, because if I start the engine now with them so far from the den site, they're going to get a serious fright. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want them to associate us with anything bad. And so far we've done, between all of us as guides, we've got to the point where they not trust, but they see us, trust is maybe not the right word, but they don't see us as something harmful or dangerous, and we definitely don't want to change that. Now come on. Now we've got to sit and just wait patiently, but when they come back, they're going to come back fast. James, you want to know what age they'll be able to successfully anal paste? I think they're probably already doing it successfully at a young age. I think they're probably transferring a little bit of a blob of something. As to whether or not it's fully developed, that sounds so weird, a fully developed anal paste. That's not quite what I meant, but you get the idea. I guess at around about a year old, they'll be contributing properly, would be my guess, just because they get to that large age. But I might be wrong. It might be tied into when they reach sexual maturity at around about 2 or so. 2, a little, maybe even a little bit older. So it could be connected to when they reach full sexual maturity. So when the females start to go into estrus and the males are capable of producing offspring, whether or not they get a chance to is a different story. She might have gone just to lie down somewhere further that way, in which case the cubs might stay with her. I'm just going to patiently wait and see whether or not they come dashing back. So while we do that, let's jump back on board so that Brent can finish off his story about hyenas.